Hi guys, a huge problem in politics is that if you have either run a business at some level or have been successful in industry, that this can translate into running a government department or the country itself. We've seen examples such as Silvio Berlusconi and to a lesser extent Donald Trump being held up as masters of business, who should be put in charge of public administrations. Business and government are completely different, and we don't have many examples of people who have been able to transfer their success into running the state. So with that in mind, Richard Tice, a businessman, believes that he, Farage and Ben Habib would be able to run the country much better than the Tories or the Labour Party. Thankfully, he was challenged on that by Andrew Neil.
Another thing that you've done, something that's easier for our
journalist.
listeners to understand, is you've got 50 billion savings in waste. It's the old chestnut of all politicians that don't know how to cut. They say, oh, we're going to save on waste and inefficiency and so on. None of you has ever been in government. You have no idea how to cut 50
but I tell you
billion
what, we
in
have.
waste.
We're people who have got a successful track record of running big businesses, right, making profits for shareholders. We know how to get stuff done. We know how to fix things, and we know how to save money. And when I talk about the savings, I always get phoned up or emailed by doctors and nurses who says the waste in the NHS is extraordinary. It's legendary. It's so great. And in other states, you can see it and sense it. And we are heading towards, there is no growth in the economy over the projections. And if we don't change course, last year alone, Andrew, right, we spent about 120 billion more than the government had. If we don't change course and get some serious growth in the economy, we are heading towards disaster. We're saying you've got to save some money in the back office and invest it in the front office. That's what we do.
Right. And of course, it's growth as well. That's the other thing politicians always say, oh, we'll pay it with more economic growth. But that, I'm sorry, but the bond markets are not going to go through with your idea that you can identify 50 billions in savings, because they know you can't, and you can't do it quickly enough. And they're also not going to bet that you will magically conjure up strong growth to pay for all this. So there'll be a run on sterling.
And if you look at my
hold on, let me finish the question. There'll be a run on sterling,
Andrew,
and there'll be a run on the bond markets.
Nonsense.
That's what will happen, because you're a bunch of amateurs when it comes to economics.
Absolute nonsense.
Exactly, a bunch of amateurs, and that's being kind. They have no understanding. Now, I want to get back to the point that I raised at the beginning of this. Business people can't run government because government is not a business. It's not profit-driven. That's the difference. Government departments are supposed to provide for citizens. They shouldn't be profit-driven. Now, this is not a criticism of business. It's just they're chalk and cheese. They're completely different things. So what happens is when you bring in a business person to run a government department, they'll focus on cost and they say, okay, let's reduce the costs. Let's fire a load of people. And then what happens? You don't have the staff you need to deal with the requirements of the public service. So if you want somebody just to cut costs, then you can bring in a business person, a consultant. They will say, okay, cut this, this, and this. And then what? Are you providing services to the public? No, you're not. This is the problem. And we've seen it throughout the world. When business people come in, when business people become politicians, it's an absolute disaster. Richard Tice is talking about, we have been able to deliver money for shareholders. But it's not about money at the end of the day. It's not about making a profit at the end of the day. It's about providing a service to the public. When it comes to the NHS, and Tice mentioned the NHS here, doctors and nurses talking about waste. Yes, there's probably a massive amount of waste that needs to be dealt with, but you wouldn't use a business person to deal with that. You have people who are working in the NHS who can deal with that. Provide them with more powers. That's what you need to do. You need to see how administrations are spending their money. But you need something different about a business and the NHS, of course, is contingency. You need to have redundancy in the NHS because the NHS, unlike a business, can't have cost cutting in order just to save money. You need to have extra resources. We saw it during the pandemic. What happened with the pandemic? There wasn't enough PPE. There weren't enough ventilators. There wasn't enough equipment and staff to deal with the problem. But if you provide the NHS with the redundancy that helps it deal with pandemics and crises like this, then it's able to deal with those crises in a much better way. But that's a cost. That's something that you couldn't justify in a business. It's like a business saying, let's hire an extra 50 staff in case we need them sometime in the future. In the NHS, you want to have that, but in a business, you couldn't justify it. You wouldn't say, let's buy a second van in case we have a problem with the first one. No, you wouldn't be able to justify that extra cost. But in a service that provides health to the public, you need to have extra ventilators, you need to have extra PPE, you need to have extra equipment sitting around in case there's an emergency. So you can't run a public service like the NHS like a business. It's nonsensical. They're completely different. And unfortunately, it sounds good to the public. Look at this business person, really successful. Let's get them run the government, because they'll be able to transfer that expertise and they'll be able to run it efficiently. But on pretty much every occasion, and I can't find any occasion where a business person has actually successfully run a government department. People will say that it's because of the bureaucracy and it's because of the pushback and it's because of the trade unions. No, it's the mindset is completely different. One is about providing a service, the other is about making a profit. And unfortunately, many people don't get that. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.